This week on Storyboard, we speak to Tim Castree, Global CEO Wavemaker, on his maiden visit to India after the formation of this new agency. And we also speak to Jay Krishnan, CEO Samsonite South Asia, about the thought behind American Tourister's new campaign featuring Virat Kohli and Cristiano Ronaldo. Hello and welcome to Storyboard. This is Shibani Gharat. Tim Castree, Global CEO Wavemaker, admits that India is one of the top markets for the agency and believes that he is trying to build the agency of the future through Wavemaker. The country has great demographic trends and broad economic trends, is how Tim likes to put it. To find out more, let's take a look at this conversation that he had with Storyboard editor Anant Rangaswami. Let's take a look.
Tim, thank you for talking to us.
Thanks for having me.
Now, one of the problems that CMOs face is the belief that today's media has almost got a magic wand to solve today's problems. And they focus on today's problems, thinking that's what they're getting solutions for. And it's a short-termism which takes over, and they forget about the mid-term and the long-term. So I want you to tell me what you do in helping brand managers and CMOs navigate the medium term and the long term, in addition to the short term, of course.
Well, there has been a lot of focus with the growth of digital and the ability to measure more and more things in digital channels and think about ROI in that context. There has been an obsessive focus on a lot of those channels that can be more easily measured today, in the second, in the moment. And so that's exactly the right question to ask. Very often we're seeing that's causing problems. That's causing problems for brands who are really sacrificing long-term growth to get at short-term, ROI. So it's a false economy often. And so our view is, is by really focusing on the purchase journey more holistically, but really in that context, understanding the contribution of brand, or the contribution of brand equity, brand health, brand preference, to the ultimate decision at the shelf or on the website in the store. Understanding the relationship between those things is really the simplest way, the most effective thing a CMO can do to get that balance right between the long-term impacts of brand building, which are still incredibly important and relevant, more important than ever, and the things that we like to measure on a short-term basis.
Tim, I'm going to ask you, have you brought this problem onto yourselves that people talk only short-term and not long-term and medium-term? Are you the people who promised the magic wand?
Well, we've all been, with the growth of digital created a lot of fragmentation of channels and platforms. And with that came a lot of fragmentation of measurement. And so it's true that when the measurement started to get disconnected, it took us a while as an industry to adjust and adapt to being able to measure and manage it holistically. That's still true today. If you ask 3 different digital attribution experts how they approach, full path digital attribution, you'll still get 3 different answers. Right. So that it's still a work in progress in the industry in terms of bringing the systems of measurement back together, so we can really give a complete, essentially kind of a single source view of what's going on and how advertisers and marketers are spending money and what those investments are contributing to the whole. So I won't say I don't think we led there, but we've certainly been adjusting and adapting to a lot of these quite significant changes in how consumers consume media, which has had a lot of created a lot of attendant challenges when it comes to the measurement and attribution of all the things that we're doing in those new platforms and places.
And to be fair to you, it's your client who's now shifted focus, and he's going to measure all that you do by the quarter and by the month and perhaps even by the week. Does that put pressure on you to therefore look more at short-termism than long-termism?
Well, our job is still to give the best advice we can to clients about stewarding their business in the long term, and so and in the medium term. I don't think advertising agencies and media agencies invented short-termism. I think there's been a lot of forces driving that quarter-to-quarter focus that we're seeing in a lot of corporations today. But it is our job to help clients who are increasingly disillusioned when the promises of micro-targeted one-to-one communication haven't yet fully realised or yielded the big scale movements for their brands and businesses that they wanted to. It's now the obligation is on us to help them navigate back to a more balanced view of the world that can help them think about growth in a bigger context over the longer term.
Right. One of the ways you do that is by the mountain of data you have.
Yes.
So you've got 400,000 consumer journeys mapped. Something like that is what I read.
We're about 450,000 individual consumer journeys mapped, and we've now done this. By the end of this year, we'll be at 1 million.
Right.
And so we're massively scaling our global database in how and why people make purchase decisions. And we're now up to, we'll be at 1 million journeys studied by the end of the year. We're probably across 50 or 60 categories by now, maybe 70, and 35 or 40 countries. So we've got a really scaled, globally consistent database that really helps us and our clients understand how people make choices and what's the relationship between brand equity, brand preference, and what we call active stage actions, the sequence and number of things people do once they've already made a decision to get into the market and shop for a product. So that's how we've been trying to help our clients navigate that. Interestingly, one of the big things that we find, if we just look at across a lot of categories for a lot of brands, when we start to look at these things just econometrically, very often, not always, but very often, the single best next action for a marketer to take is to build brand equity and brand preference. It is the number one thing they can do to drive better downstream conversion, better efficiency, and better effectiveness. So ironically, the idea of there's this kind of intellectual battle between brand and performance, but actually building strong brands is one of the highest ROI, most efficient, effective, highest performance actions that marketers can take, because it's still a huge shortcut when people are faced with a barrage of choices on the website, at the shelf, in the channel, wherever they're shopping. It's still a very, very important shortcut. And those that have strong brands are able to significantly more effectively and efficiently navigate sometimes very treacherous, later stage purchase journeys than those with weak brands.
Now I want you to break this down as if I were an idiot, which perhaps I am, but an example of one of these customer journeys, what is it that you track all the way from the beginning to the end? Just describe that for my viewer, so he gets a sense of what, if he trusts you with his account, what is in this 450,000 which is going to become 1 million database?
So we start with the purchase, and then we work backwards. Right. So we start with first understanding what brand you bought in the category. Right. Then we work backwards and understand what triggered you into the market. So we understand and rank the importance of triggers. So if you're buying a new car, maybe your lease ran out, maybe your car got to 7 years old, any number of factors. Maybe you had a new kid and you needed a bigger car. We'll understand the importance of triggers that moved you into a market, into what we call the active stage, when you're really shopping. The average across all categories globally is 7% of the time you are actually in a shopping mode. Right. That can range from weeks and weeks to moments, depending on the category. But once you've decided to make a purchase, then what we measure and track is what's the order and sequence of things and influence of the things that you do. You do go to a search term, I visit a website, I ask a friend for their advice, I look at a review online, so understanding those things. But then we work back and understand how do those things connect to the strength of the brand preference you had before you were even triggered into the market. So we're really looking at this purchase journey, that whole source from the attributes the brand had, the strength of your preference, what you thought you were going to buy, is that actually what you bought, what triggered you into market, what did you do once you were in market, and bring that together into the single source data set that helps us understand the relationship between all those things. Right.
Now, a new challenge for you is not as new as we think, it's much older, is e-commerce. Now, almost every category, including say the FMCG majors in India, are now looking at e-commerce. You're trying to sell soaps and toothpaste and ice cream on e-commerce. So tell me how you guys help brands in the e-commerce space.
Yeah, well, it's important. You don't have a conversation with a CMO or a CMO that does not include the words digital transformation and e-commerce. I feel like you could just put those conversations on repeat. So the first thing that's really important to understand as we think about e-commerce, buying online it's very important. In many cases for many brands globally, including FMCG brands, as you point out, including in India, in many cases, e-commerce sales represent 30, 40, 50, 80, sometimes 100, 120% of their growth. So sometimes it's the only thing that's growing for a lot of businesses, so it's becoming really important. I think it's really important to understand with e-com that it is an endpoint. It's a point of transaction which has very different features and characteristics from a physical retail purchase, but at the end of the day, it's still the place that I'm shopping. And there's a lot you can do in that environment to optimize your ability to close a sale, just like there is in a physical store. Sure. So, but then, it's also important to understand that that's what it is. So working back from that, whether I closed a transaction in a physical store or in an e-commerce platform, I still need to understand the relationship of the things between the brand, the triggers, and what my shopping behaviours were that led to that purchase. So we've certainly been building deep, specialist expertise in the area of e-commerce. We have, 100 of these folks, working in India alone across the WPP companies in an integrated way, thinking about, with deep e-commerce expertise. So it's important to have deep expertise in that specialism that we've built. But it is also really important for a CMO to understand how does the e-commerce transaction fit into the overall scheme of shopping behaviour and the omni-channel shopping picture, and still understand the relationship of brands and brand preference, brand health, brand love in driving that sale, regardless of whether it's happening in a physical retail location or happening in a virtual one.
All right. Finally, Tim, you're a global CEO, so you visit all your markets, and India is an important market for you. So tell me, how is India different from your other major markets, positively and negatively?
Yeah, well, I think the number one, the number one difference with India, I think, is the spectrum of behaviours we see. It's quite diverse from, very high-end, shopping behaviours all the way down to, very, categories that are still, young and emerging, and consumers that are still, young and emerging. So the complexity of the retail environment, the scale and complexity of the retail environment for mass brands is at a scale and level that, maybe you see it in China, but, it's really unique to the market. So I think, it's quite a kind of diverse retail environment, and quite a broad economic spectrum. So that creates a lot of interest. What's exciting about India, what I love about it, is it has a lot of great things going for us. It's got the tailwinds of the great demographic trends and great broad economic trends. So we're seeing macro growth. In a world which growth has been more challenged, there's been a lot of talk about growth in our industry lately. To see a market in India that's still growing at 13-14% it's a really strong growth market. So it's getting growth there. It also it's a very modern and progressive market. So there's growing digital sophistication, so much growth in the digital areas, in e-commerce, in digital video, in display, in programmatic, all these areas. So there's a lot of sophistication in the market as well. So we're seeing growth in those areas, which is enabling agencies like mine to diversify a lot of services.
Fantastic. Good to talk to you, Tim, and hope to see you in India again soon.
I'll be back soon.
Thank you.
It is time for us to take a short break. On the other side of this break, we speak to Jay Krishnan, CEO Samsonite South Asia, about the thought behind American Tourister's new campaign with Virat Kohli and Cristiano Ronaldo.